The mysterious passenger. A ticket to nowhere. The rain drizzled steadily over Portland International Airport, painting the tarmac in shimmering streaks of silver. Inside the bustling terminal, travelers rushed past, their minds occupied with holiday plans and family reunions. Thanksgiving was just a day away. Amid the crowd, a man moved with quiet purpose, neither hurried nor hesitant. He was unremarkable yet deliberate, dressed in a dark suit, neatly pressed white shirt, and a slim black tie. A pair of sunglasses rested on his nose, even indoors, obscuring his eyes. He carried a plain briefcase in one hand and, in the other, a single one-way ticket for Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a short trip from Portland to Seattle. At 2:50 p.m., he stepped aboard the Boeing 727, blending effortlessly among the 36 passengers. No one gave him a second glance. He took seat 18C, near the rear of the cabin, and placed his briefcase carefully on the seat beside him. When the flight attendant, Florence Schaffner, approached for drink orders, he smiled politely and requested a bourbon and soda. He sipped his drink in silence, observing the world through the thick glass of the airplane window. Below, the vast expanse of the Pacific Northwest stretched endlessly, rugged forests, winding rivers, and the distant shadow of the Cascade Mountains. The engines hummed their steady tune, and the aircraft climbed into the sky. Then, as casually as one might hand a waiter a check at the end of a meal, he slipped a small folded note into Florence's hand. She barely glanced at it, assuming, like many flight attendants did, that it was the clumsy attempt of a lonely businessman. She tucked it into her pocket without a word and turned to leave. A voice, calm but firm, stopped her mid-step. "Miss, I think you should read that now." The note and the bomb. Florence hesitated. The man's tone lacked urgency, yet something about it demanded attention. Slowly, she unfolded the note. The words, written in neat capital letters, struck her like a jolt of electricity. "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit beside me." Her breath caught. A wave of cold terror spread through her veins, but her years of training kept her expression neutral. Swallowing hard, she slid into the empty seat beside him, her hands gripping the edge of her uniform. The man leaned in slightly, speaking in the same composed voice. "You're going to do exactly as I say, and nobody gets hurt." To prove he wasn't bluffing, he flicked open the silver clasps of his briefcase. Inside, nestled against the dark lining, were red cylindrical sticks attached to a web of wires and a battery. A bomb. Florence's throat went dry. She nodded stiffly, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Good," the man said, snapping the briefcase shut. "Now, listen carefully. I want $200,000 in cash, for parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. Tell the captain. And don't try anything foolish." Florence forced herself to stand, her legs unsteady beneath her. She moved toward the cockpit, fighting the urge to break into a run. The passengers remained blissfully unaware, reading newspapers, chatting, sipping coffee. No one knew that, at that moment, they were sitting inside a ticking time bomb. Rising tension. In the cockpit, the message was relayed to Captain William Scott. A veteran pilot with years of experience, he stiffened at the news but kept his composure. His hands gripped the controls tighter as he radioed Seattle-Tacoma Airport. "We have a situation." The tower's response came quickly. "What kind of situation?" The captain took a steadying breath before replying. "Hijacking." Down in the cabin, the man, his face calm, his posture relaxed, glanced at his watch. Everything was going exactly as planned. A hijacking like no other. A city held hostage. The Boeing 727 circled above Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, its passengers oblivious to the tension coiling in the cockpit. Below, an army of law enforcement officers and FBI agents scrambled to meet the demands of the man now controlling the aircraft's fate. The runway glowed under floodlights, illuminating an unmarked bag filled with $200,000 in used $20 bills and 4 parachutes, 2 civilian, 2 military. Inside the cabin, D.B. Cooper, as the world would come to know him, remained composed. He barely moved from seat 18C, his sunglasses still shielding his eyes, his demeanor betraying no sign of anxiety or hesitation. Florence Schaffner, the flight attendant, sat rigid beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her training told her to observe. Watch his mannerisms. Listen to his tone. If he were nervous, he didn't show it. If he were lying, he didn't stutter. She dared a glance at him. Who was this man? Cooper turned slightly toward her, as if reading her thoughts. "It'll be over soon," he said simply, as though he were discussing the weather. But Florence knew better. Something about the way he said it, the certainty, the quiet control, sent a chill through her. The exchange. At 5:39 p.m., Flight 305 touched down in Seattle. Rain lashed against the windows as the aircraft taxied toward a remote section of the airport. FBI agents, dressed in plain clothes to avoid provocation, positioned themselves at a distance. They had strict orders: no sudden movements, no heroics. The cabin door creaked open, and a flight attendant stepped out to retrieve the ransom and parachutes. Cooper remained seated, expression unchanged, watching the exchange like a chess master executing a well-rehearsed move. Once the ransom was secured, Cooper gave his next order. "Let the passengers go." One by one, the 36 passengers, along with Florence Schaffner and another flight attendant, disembarked into the cold Seattle night. Their faces were a mix of relief and confusion. They had no idea how close they had come to disaster. Inside, only a skeleton crew remained: Captain William Scott, First Officer Bob Radazak, Flight Engineer H.E. Anderson, and one flight attendant, Tina Mucklow. The hijacker leaned forward. "Now we fly south." The escape plan. Cooper's instructions were specific. The plane was to head toward Mexico City, but there were conditions. The aircraft must stay under 10,000 feet. The landing gear must remain down. The cabin must remain unpressurized. The rear air stair must be operable mid-flight. The pilots exchanged wary glances. This wasn't just a getaway, it was a jump plan. Cooper intended to leave the plane mid-air. Captain Scott objected. "We don't have enough fuel to reach Mexico." Cooper considered this. Then, without argument, he adjusted his demand. "Fine. We'll refuel in Reno." Tina Mucklow, now the only flight attendant on board, stood nearby, trying to steady her breath. She had served drinks, answered questions, reassured passengers in distress. But this was something else. She watched as Cooper calmly secured the ransom money into a knapsack. He examined the parachutes with practiced efficiency. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Tina finally spoke. "Do you have a grudge against the airline?" Cooper smirked. "I don't have a grudge against anybody." A strange answer. At 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 lifted off once more, carrying only 4 crew members and a man who was about to vanish into legend. The search that led nowhere. The jump into darkness. At 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the vast wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, the cabin of Flight 305 shuddered. A sudden change in air pressure sent a ripple through the aircraft's frame. The rear air stair had been deployed. In the cockpit, Captain William Scott tightened his grip on the controls. The crew had no way of seeing what was happening behind them, but they knew. D.B. Cooper had jumped. The wind screamed through the open stairwell, tearing into the night. Outside, a relentless storm raged, icy rain slashing through the sky, gusts reaching over 200 miles per hour. Below, nothing but dense forest, jagged cliffs, and the unforgiving currents of the Lewis River. No one saw him go. No one would ever see him again. When the plane finally landed in Reno, Nevada, at 10:15 p.m., the FBI and law enforcement swarmed the aircraft. Guns drawn, agents rushed aboard. But they found only the exhausted flight crew and an empty rear cabin. The man in the dark suit was gone. The largest manhunt in U.S. history. Within hours, the FBI launched NORJAC, Northwest Hijacking, a full-scale investigation unlike any before. Dozens of military aircraft, helicopters, and ground teams were dispatched to scour the rugged terrain where Cooper was believed to have landed. Yet, despite the most intense search effort in U.S. history, not a single trace of the hijacker was found. No parachute. No footprints. No body. Not even a shred of fabric from his suit. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. For weeks, search teams combed through the forests of Washington and Oregon, questioning hunters, loggers, and locals. But no one had seen anything unusual. No reports of a man stumbling out of the woods, no bodies washing up in the rivers. The ransom money, meticulously marked for tracking, never appeared in circulation. Had he survived? Or had the storm claimed him, burying his remains deep within the wilderness? The first break in the case. For nearly a decade, the mystery endured. The FBI compiled a list of over 800 suspects, interviewing former paratroopers, criminals, and missing persons. Then, in 1980, a shocking discovery reignited the case. An 8-year-old boy, Brian Ingram, was digging in the sand along the Columbia River when his shovel struck something odd. Buried beneath layers of dirt, he unearthed a stack of rotting $20 bills, $5, 800 in total. The serial numbers matched the ransom money given to Cooper. But the location, more than 20 miles from the suspected drop zone, only deepened the mystery. If Cooper had died in the jump, how did his money end up buried along a riverbank? Some theorized he had survived and intentionally hidden the cash. Others believed the river's currents had carried the money from his final resting place. But no further clues surfaced. The man without a face. The case grew colder. Over the decades, theories swirled. Some claimed D.B. Cooper was a skilled paratrooper who had carefully planned his escape. Others believed he never meant to survive at all, that his leap into the night was a final act of defiance, a calculated suicide. In 2016, after 45 years of investigation, the FBI officially closed the case, declaring it unsolved. The legend of D.B. Cooper became more than just a crime story, it became a ghost story. Because in the end, Cooper didn't just steal money. He stole something far more valuable. He stole an answer the world would never get. Theories and the legend lives on. The man who vanished. Long after the search teams packed up, after the FBI archived its case files, and after the ransom money faded into history, one question refused to die. What happened to D.B. Cooper? 4 years, armchair detectives, conspiracy theorists, and seasoned investigators pored over every shred of evidence, every possible lead. They dissected flight paths, wind speeds, and terrain data, trying to answer the question the FBI never could. Did Cooper survive the jump? Some experts scoffed at the idea. The storm that night had been brutal, with temperatures below freezing. The forests of Washington's Cascade Mountains were unforgiving, endless miles of cliffs, rivers, and dense wilderness. Even the most experienced parachutists wouldn't attempt such a jump in those conditions. Yet, there was no body, no parachute, no undeniable proof that he had perished. And as long as there was no proof, there was possibility. Theories that refused to die. The theories about Cooper's fate took on a life of their own, each more compelling and bizarre than the last. 1. The soldier who outsmarted the world. Some believed Cooper was a military veteran, possibly a paratrooper from Vietnam or Korea. He had picked a Boeing 727 for a reason. It was one of the only commercial aircraft with a rear air stair he could deploy mid-flight. He knew the aircraft's mechanics, the flight patterns, the parachutes. He had planned every detail. If he survived, he would have walked out of the forest, changed his identity, and disappeared. 2. The man who never intended to live. Others believed Cooper was a man with nothing to lose. The jump wasn't about escape, it was about defiance. A last act of control. Perhaps he knew he wouldn't survive. Perhaps that was the point. 3. The perfect cover-up. Another theory suggested Cooper had an accomplice waiting for him. He had a rendezvous point, supplies, and a getaway plan already in place. Maybe he landed near a hidden road, where a car was waiting to take him to safety. 4. D.B. Cooper never existed. Some skeptics went even further. What if Cooper wasn't a real person? What if he was an alias for a group? A decoy in a larger scheme? The neat handwriting on the ransom note, the methodical nature of the hijacking, was it truly the work of one man? The FBI's last word. For decades, the FBI hunted for Cooper. They interrogated former criminals, tested forensic evidence, and chased leads across the country. At one point, they had over 800 suspects, but none could be definitively linked to the crime. Then, in 2016, after 45 years, they gave up. The case was officially closed, left to rest in the archives as an unsolved mystery. It remains the only unsolved hijacking in U.S. history, a legend that never fades. Today, the legend of D.B. Cooper lives on. His name is whispered in bars, debated in online forums, and reimagined in books and films. Every so often, a new suspect emerges, an old man on his deathbed, a long-lost relative with a confession. But the truth remains just out of reach. Perhaps that's exactly how Cooper wanted it. Because in the end, he didn't just escape the FBI. He escaped history itself.